Good morning, folks. And here we are for a journey episode on this Tuesday morning. And I'm very happy to have with me William Gibby Gibson, okay, the author of Escape from Jamaica. And I've got Todd Baumann here giving us a little bit of, so I just don't go running off at the mouth and everything and have some comments about it. And, I was very happy to get this submission from Gibby because, I started this off looking into the subject I call CIA drugs, you know, and when my daddy first told me about it, it took me a couple of years even just to get my little head around it. Then took another 20 years to kind of understand it. And, there wasn't a lot of books out there that were talking about it. And so Gibby sent me this book, and Lord have mercy, this guy met some of the major people who were involved with CIA drugs. And, the CIA drugs is more than just the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States importing narcotics, okay? Because every intelligence agency out there worth their salt imports narcotics. And more what this has to do about is really the prohibitions that are put on us that allow plants to be sold for more than gold, okay? And when that happens, okay, you have a lot of people running around trying to make money. Okay, I mean, I remember reading about it, and I get to, I start reading this book, and all of a sudden, some general pops up in there and says, if we're going to be the big boys on the bench, we better be the big boys on the bench. And so, that's some of their excuses for doing the narcotics trafficking because, when you do narcotics trafficking, you're in the shadows there, okay? You collect intelligence, but also you collect a lot of money, okay? And these big piles of money allow these people to corrupt the world that we live in. And Lord have mercy, aren't we living in a corrupt world these days? So, Gibby, I really appreciate you coming on with us here and talking about what you got yourself involved in. And so you went off to college, met a girl that said, I'll do something nice for you if you smoke a joint, and, and then through the mechanisms of the corruption that has been put in place around ports and other things where the ports get controlled by criminal gangs because that's one way to control them. And so, Gibby, how'd you get involved and why are you still alive?
That's a good question. Why am I still alive? It's a real miracle. That's for sure. Only with God's help. What do you want to know? How did I get involved?
Yeah, well, for you can talk a little bit about the miracles because I mean, the story. Your book kind of starts off. You're running away from the cops and you're up on some big overpass
Overpass.
and
Yeah.
you sit there and hang and you see the cops coming for you and you look down and you drop. How far did you drop?
Well, the police measured it at 65 feet. To me, when I was hanging out the bridge, it looked like 100 or 200 feet.
So why ain't you dead?
Yeah.
That's the question of the day. And I think about that every day. Like it's impossible to survive that without a broken ankle or being paralyzed or so. There's only one. I was rolled up by the giant hand of an angel who was my grandfather, as my little voice tells me, and there's no other explanation.
Yeah, yeah. So
Did you roll at the right time or just hit your feet and roll? I
No, I
mean,
was just the landing was so soft. It was like I landed on my hands and knees. It was like more gentle than jumping off the side of my bed. It was quite an extraordinary feeling. Of course, I was too dumb at that age to realize it. It was like I thought I was being in good shape from playing football, but that's how stupid I was.
So you met a guy at a well, actually, you met somebody early on, and you didn't know about him until later. What he was is this Eric guy, and
Eric
you
Dawson, yeah.
and so you guys living there in Montreal, and you had a bunch of friends you ran with, and they started smoking some pot and different things, and you learned from somebody that he was running a airline, part of the freight part of it, and he was going to allow you to get suitcases into Canada. And so, well, tell me about Jamaica. What was Jamaica like?
Well, first of all, that wasn't Eric. That was Pat. Pat Wild was the guy who worked at the airport.
No, there's a lot of characters in the
There
book.
is, yeah.
Yes, there's quite a few.
That's one reason we put a cast of characters there in the beginning, so people could keep their heads about them there. So again, what was Jamaica like in the late '60s and early '70s?
Well, the first time I went there was like 1970, and it's quite the place. It was actually because I was one of the first people to hear reggae music. I couldn't believe how great it was. It was like even the people in New York City hadn't heard about reggae music. I could have become a record producer if I was smart instead of a drug dealer, but this is my destiny. So, yeah, Jamaica was a beautiful place. I love it. It's just an incredible country.
One of the things I noticed, Gibby, reading your book is imagery, very good imagery. You're able to paint a picture for people. You could see the tiki huts, you can see the bar, you can see the porch, and the guy sitting in the chair, and all of this stuff. Um, I guess you could say that you, in some way, were saved by the CIA. Not a whole lot of people get to say that. But you were in jail, right, in Jamaica,
Correct.
and pretty squalid conditions, from what I could tell. That again, more imagery, very effective with words, which is very important for any writer who wants his material read. But can you take us through that experience? You probably had it at one point or another while you were in that jail. Great concern that you would always be there. Can you paint the tell us what it was like in that condition and how you did get out of there?
Oh, the conditions were unbelievable. I mean, it's like 10 guys sitting in a cell 8 feet by 7 feet with three wooden benches, guys lying on the concrete floor that wasn't even smoothed out. It was all bumpy. So I felt really bad for the guys lying on the concrete floor. Yeah, it was hard to describe how depressing it was because every time stops when you're in a place like that. It's like every minute seems like an hour and every hour seems like a day. And it's an incredible feeling. You're just, hopeless desperation is one way to describe it. All these guys in the prison they all accepted it much better than I did. For me, it was like, I really don't know how to describe the experience. It was so terrible. And there was like a bucket in the corner for guys to use to take a whiz. So you can just imagine what it was like. 24 hours a day locked down. You're not allowed out. You're not even allowed to get a drink of water.
Pretty hot, I'm assuming. But chicken and red stripe, right? Those were that was the time when you got some relief, right?
Yeah, we got that right away. Ainsley showed up with a guy named Delbert Christie, who owned a garage down the street, who arranged for the guards to get chicken dinners for me and red stripe beer. So otherwise, I would have been eating this god awful mush, which turns out to be mushed up vegetables, but it was pretty disgusting looking. So yeah, I was lucky in that regard, but he only felt good for about 3 minutes.
How and why did you get out?
Well, we were there for 30 days in the Montreal. We thought we were. I thought I was looking at possibly 25 years. So that was the feeling I was getting. It was like, and we hired these lawyers who the guys in the cell recommended, Ian Ramsey and Howard Hamilton, two of the best lawyers in the Caribbean. Howard Hamilton actually became the Minister of Justice in Jamaica later on. So he was well known. So they did a pretty good job defending us. Jack ended up only getting 18 months instead of 25 years, but that was just because the new gun law hadn't passed legally until 2 days after we were arrested. So he got pretty lucky there. So we went to trial 6 or 7 times during that 30 days. I sat in that courtroom every day, all day long. It was like the lawyers were pretty sharp, but we could tell it wasn't going to do any good by the time we got to it. The 6th day of our trial, and the judge started sentencing these guys to a year in Spanish Town prison because they owed $20 alimony. We thought, oh, that's it. We're done here. It's all over. So yeah, I got out when we got transferred up to. We got sentenced and sent up to. Well, I got sentenced only to 6 months, so I was lucky actually for possession of weed, which there wasn't. It was actually planted in the house. And Jack got 18 months instead of 25 years, but I was only there for like 12 hours. And Eric's dad got me out. He had a letter from the Minister of Justice. These guys ran everything. They just ran the whole show in Jamaica. They had the police and the army on their payrolls. They had everybody who was like doing whatever they wanted to do. And that's the way it ran. And Sidney O'Connell, my neighbor, who was another interesting guy. Want me to talk about him?
Sure.
So when we were growing up, my dad was there, worked for Air Canada. We moved to Montreal when I was 11. I think it was 1958. And around 1960, a couple of years later, where I was like 13, and there was a maid who came there in the summertime to take care of Peter and his brother, who went to private school, and the O'Connells lived at the top of Cedar Avenue. But they were never there. But it turned out in 1960, Sid and his wife Nancy, who I got to know Nancy really well later on in the story. I actually stayed at her villa 6 or 7 or 8 times. I only put it one time in the book, but her and her husband were living in Turkey at the time. They moved to Turkey she told me they moved to Turkey in 1959. They were there to change the government because the president was turning pro-Muslim. He was arresting journalists and putting them in jail. So they moved there, and she said, how did she say it? She goes, I had an affair with a colonel. She said a colonel, but it turned out it was actually a general. I guess she thought it was more interesting being a colonel. But anyway, I had an affair with I had an affair with this colonel who arrested the president, charged him with treason, executed a few of his cronies. We stayed there until after the government was transferred back to citizen control, and they paid off the general $5 million. So that's how these guys moved. But anyway, when we were 13, the maid found bank books lying around the house of Sidney O'Connell's house with over 400 million in cash.
Oof.
And of course, as a 13-year-old, I was thinking, well, surely Peter would be driving a Corvette if he had that kind of money. So we didn't believe it. $1 million was an incredible amount of money, but it turned out it was all true. They had way more money than that, but he had 400 million at least in cash available to him. He gave 5 million to that general who
Right.
who arrested the president and then executed him.
Right. And this again is money that's made from the sale of drugs and narcotics. And
Well,
now,
this is all off book. This is
yeah,
the CIA. Well, they pumped money into the chemical bank in New York, which was owned by the CIA at the time in the 70s. It was the ninth largest bank in the world, and it was on the verge of bankruptcy because it lent so much money to Brazil and Argentina, and so these guys pumped about 15 billion a year back into the bank. But otherwise, they kept all the money and did whatever they wanted with it. It was a whole group of them, like 10 or 12 or 15. I don't know how many were involved, but Eric's dad was involved. He was a professor. Sidney O'Connell was involved, and all these other guys, Colonel Paul Helliwell, Lansdale,
So so
Wild Bill Donovan, all these guys were just behind it all.
so you got to meet Paul Helliwell.
I saw him.
You saw him.
I never got to talk to him. He was just a glimpse walking by. The only guys I got to talk to were Sidney O'Connell, his wife Nancy, and Eric's dad.
And so did they tell you any reasons why they were doing this, or did they just do it?
No, they never told me any. They never even talked about it really, as far as like why they were doing it. It was obvious why they were doing it.
So now you were offered a position in their criminal network
It was a bit
to
of a surprise.
come back to the United States and run a Jamaican posse.
Well, that's what I assumed it was because I just figured that out later. But it was the way they put it was they just offered me my own city. That was how they put it. This city here below Portland is yours if you want it. But after getting out of jail, I really wasn't too interested in getting back into the lifestyle, especially after Eric was shot and killed. It was like this guy was supposed to be untouchable. You know, he was like, but you always run into some character who just figures, these guys, none of these guys, you can't trust anybody in that business. That's what it comes down to.
Well,
Why, if they got you out of there, why did they not make you do what they wanted you? Why did you have the opportunity to leave? Why were you able to get out?
Well, how can they force you? You know, it's like, I guess they could have somehow, but that never came up.
Hmm.
It was just an offer, take it or leave it.
so now again, can you talk a little bit about how the CIA affected Jamaica? Because when you first went there, wasn't Manley the prime minister?
Yes, correct. Well, Manley was heading towards communism. He was talking to Cuba, and he was talking to Castro, and so they were worried about it because they had so much money. They didn't want the same thing to happen in Jamaica that happened in Cuba, where all these guys lost millions and millions of dollars. And Sidney O'Connell owned so much of Jamaica. I mean, he has like 13 hotels and vast tracts of land. He built Iron Shore. There was like a state Iron Shore, like I don't know how many villas were there, 50 or 100. But he built all that. And he was like, yeah, well, he owned all the slot machines in Jamaica. There was about over 200 of them. Eric knew the Sidney O'Connell's money collector quite well. Sidney O'Connell spent a lot of time talking to Eric. I could never figure out why until later on in the story I got to realize why. It was because his father was the professor, who was one of Sidney O'Connell's main guys, right? And Sidney was a political guy. He was in charge of all the government changes in South America and Turkey, where he and Nancy lived for 2.5 years. And Eric's dad ran all the drug ops in Jamaica. Eric's dad actually built the runway, brought in all the engineers. They built a runway in the mountains of Jamaica, installed radar. Montego Bay Airport didn't have radar, but these guys had radar in the hills. Flights were coming in every night from South America. Virtually
Yeah,
2 to 3 thousand pounds of cocaine every night was coming in.
yeah.
They had so many ops going out. Ainsley told me later on, he ended up working for he ended up working for the CIA. He actually ran all the drug ops out of Jamaica. He was a big time businessman there when I met him. But then when the island collapsed and he lost all his money, he lost everything. It was like he became broke.
Why did it collapse? I mean, I just find that strange and interesting because I mean it was quite the scene, and they were sending the lamb's bread all over the world, and then all of a sudden, Jamaica just kind of went silent for a while.
Well, there was so much violence there. People were getting shot left, right, and center. I mean, it's just everybody left the island. A lot of Jamaicans left. I mean, Ainsley stayed, but he owned a villa that he ended up initially he sold it to somebody for 50,000. It cost him 90 to build it. He owned a chicken shop in Overton Plaza, and he was the manager of Desnos and Geddes, the biggest bottling plant on the island. So he was an astute businessman, but eventually he had no choice. He went to work for them, and he just did everything they said. Then he ended up running all the ops. He ran the runway in the hills. He was in charge of the police and the army. They guarded it 24 hours a day.
Wow. So, how come everybody doesn't know all this stuff?
I don't know. How would anybody get to know it? It was weird that I got to know it.
And we get to tell about it in your book, Escape from Jamaica, which I'm very, very, very proud and honored to publish. I mean, because in reading it, you talk about, having good times and meeting all kinds of tourists that were coming down there, and then you go back a little bit later in the 70s, and it's just completely quiet, and there's nobody on the streets, nobody anywhere.
First of all, you should see what I looked like back in the 70s. Here's what I look like. You see me there?
Yo's a hippie.
Had some hair on you.
Yeah. So that was me, 1971, when I was chairman of Winter Carnival. So where were we? Sorry, my
Well,
apologies.
I read
Okay,
it.
from 1974, after we got out of
Yeah.
jail, um, yeah, that's when all the violence really started. So when I went back, I went back in 76, but I went directly to Montego Bay. But when I went there in 1978 and I was in Kingston, it was shocking because there was not one person anywhere. I'm talking about a city with 1 million people, and every day you go, there'd be thousands of people everywhere. Every bus stop had 50 or 100 people waiting for a bus. And when I got there was nobody there. I was the only person. I felt like the last man on the earth. I felt like I was the Omega Man in that movie. It was just it was not a weird feeling. It was a scary feeling. It was like, oh my God. It was like, what the hell is going on here? Couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I got on the plane there, that was another weird thing. Was I got on the plane and there was no flights in 1978. There was no direct flights to Montego Bay. I think there was one flight on a week going in and out of there. So I had to fly to New York City I was in Victoria. So I flew to Montreal, then I flew to New York City, and I got on an American Airlines flight, and I was the only white guy. There was 8 black guys on the plane dressed in $3,000 suits who looked like soldiers. Well, it turned out they were soldiers, and just me. So it was like, it was crazy. When they got to the airport, they had no luggage, no hand luggage. They didn't pick up any luggage. They didn't have anything. They didn't carry anything. They never spoke a word on the whole flight to each other. They were all sitting really close to each other, but they never spoke to each other. We got to the airport. The customs guys never asked them any questions. They were right in front of me. They just looked at their passports, nodded their heads, and let them right on through and asked me a few questions. All 8 of them got into 2 gray Mercedes and just disappeared into the darkness. And I got rented my car. But these guys well, it was interesting because Trevor told me that when Norman, the head of the CIA station head there, Norman Descoteaux, and when he came in 19, I think it was 78, lose track of the years there, but he brought a lot of guys in. He brought in a lot of special. He actually brought in the guy, the ex-U.S. Marine who trained the Tonton Macoute. He brought him in to work with these gangs in Kingston. So that's what the kind of things they were doing.
So you have kind of controlled corruption, you might say. I mean, now the drug trade there, it basically operated by a little bit of stealth. Okay, you put a bunch of weed in a suitcase and try and get it through, but then you would corrupt the people at customs or corrupt the people at the shipping or the at the airlines. I mean, how would the drugs move?
Well, that was all small time compared to what they were doing. But for us, it was just Pat just worked on the airport. His dad was director of flight operations. So he was like a big shot at the airport. He trained all the pilots. So Pat was never graduated high school, but his dad got him a job. He was we were working the evening shift, and he was after 1 year he was one of the crew chiefs on baggage control. So it wasn't a matter of going through customs or anything. He could do anything he wanted. So he just got on the plane, grabbed the suitcases, and put them into his truck that he was driving around, and it was as simple as that. On one occasion, he could do it several different ways. He took the stuff over to a rental car he parked on the other side of the runway. But on one occasion, he was also able to just take the suitcases and put them on a domestic turnstile on the airport. So they would show up without going through customs, they would just show up on the
Mm.
domestic side, and someone would come in and grab them that way. So he could do virtually anything he wanted.
Yeah. So
You,
go ahead.
Gibby, one of the things in your experience, you were targeted specifically by a hitman, right?
Danny
And
Polanski.
and there were times there where you kind of knew it. It's almost like he didn't try to hide it. Can you take us through that feeling, that experience of those incidences and those exchanges, and how you were ultimately able to break free of that, even when it seemed like it was the end of the rope?
Well, in my mind, it wasn't going to be the end of the rope. I mean, whatever I had to do to get free, I was going to do. So I got a phone call. Ainsley left a message to the villa. There was a phone call coming in for me at 2 o'clock that same day. So I went over, and there was a guy staying at the villa with me, a guy named Jack Grabowski. So I went over to Ainsley. We drove over to Ainsley's house about 1:45 for the phone call, and Rebecca answered. The phone rang. It was Rebecca on the other end, my girlfriend. And she told me the story. She said Eric and Karen and Mickey were all shot and killed the night before last. And there's two guys coming in the 2:30 flight to get rid of you. And the guy staying at the villa with you is in on it. So at that moment, it was like complete terror and panic just overtook my whole body. I can remember I was hanging onto the bars. Ainsley's house was all enclosed with iron bars on the porch, all the windows and everything. And it just was an ugly feeling just came over the whole world. It was like all the beautiful, lush vegetation just seemed to be enshrouded with ugliness. It was just like panic. I was like, my heart was beating so fast I couldn't control it. It was an incredible experience. So anyway, we go down to the airport and pick these two guys up, and we pull up in the arrival section. And as soon as I see them, I knew I'd actually met Gordy one time, Jack's partner. The other guy I had never met was Danny Polanski, but Mickey had pointed him out to me when we were the day before I left for Jamaica in November. It was Mickey and I pulled up outside this tavern in the East End where all his bank robbing buddies hung out, and he said, "See that guy walking?" It was an amazing coincidence that he was walking. It was a snowstorm happening. He was walking across the street. He said, "See that guy walking across the street there? That's Danny Polanski. If he ever shows up anywhere, he's there to get rid of somebody. That's all they want to use him for." Jack and the guys want to bring him into the organization. He said, I told him I didn't think it was necessary, but they're going to do it anyway. So when we pulled up in the arrival section, there was Danny Polanski. So I already knew he was coming there to get rid of me, but it was weird knowing that I had actually seen him, and Mickey had pointed him out to me. So then we go up to the villa, and we're sitting right across from him. It was like invisible chains were like he just wanted to kill me right in the spot. I could just see it in his eyes. It was like, but of course they couldn't do anything. The maid was in the villa, Gertrude. They couldn't. What are they going to do? Start shooting the maid and shooting me and shooting it? That wasn't the way they would do it. they were planning on getting rid of me later that night. At least I think it was later that night, because it was also weird because they wanted my contact. All the whole time Jack was staying at the villa, he came down with his wife for 1 week. I had a phone call, and they said this guy, friend of Mickey and Eric's coming down for a stay for a week. And I said, okay. So I picked him up at the airport with his wife. And where was I going with this story now? I lost track of where I was going.
I think you were telling us about the escape from Danny Polanski.
Okay, we'll go back to that. So yeah, anyway, so we actually all I had to get out of there. I was like, my heart was beating so fast that the pain in my chest was incredible. So I said, I'm going down the Holiday Inn to say goodbye to Lorraine, this girl I'd met when with her and her mom, and they all jumped up like little Jack in the Box soldiers, and oh, we'll come with you. Make sure to see the guys and get a chance to look around. I was like, oh, here we go. So I was stuck with them at the Holiday Inn for an hour, and we went back to the villa. And I tried the same thing again. I said, I'm going downtown. I'll get you some guys, some girls. And Danny goes, I'll go with you. And Jack goes, well, I'll go with you. So we ended up down at the Casa Montego Hotel, go to the bar upstairs, the Fantasy Disco, and we're all sitting there. The place is empty. And so I left them sitting there. Danny had the keys for the car. He actually drove from the villa. He wanted to drive, so he drove. So he had the keys. So I said to Jack, I said, give me the keys. So I'll go get you guys some girls. I thought it was the last chance. If that didn't work, then I was gonna go down to the front desk and have them call the police, do something. I wasn't gonna go. I wasn't leaving there with those guys no matter what happened. That was my plan. But anyway, I don't know. I guess they got too drunk at the Holiday Inn, and they'd all had about 10 or 12 drinks each. And Jack said, give him the keys. I couldn't believe it. And Danny Polanski couldn't believe it either. He just darted his eyes over at Jack and just like, what the hell are you doing? Or the look in his eyes, and he looked me straight in the eyes. He goes, dangle the keys in front of me. And he was just dangling the keys like that in front of me going, he knew I wasn't coming back. But like a good soldier boy, he just handed me the keys, and I bounded down the stairs, and I was out of there like a flash. And I would rush back to the villa and grabbed all my stuff as fast as I could. I got my airline ticket, the money. I had cash stacked in the drapes. Didn't bother with my golf clubs. I figured I had no time for them. And then I headed out and went to the Holiday Inn, and then I went to Kingston and left them sitting there. So then they were watching the airport. I knew they'd be watching the airport. Then it turned out Danny Polanski was watching the Montego Bay airport. And Jack and Gordo, I don't know how they got up there, whether they flew up the next morning or drove up. I guess they probably flew up right away. I'm sure they did. And so I went to Kingston and went to the moneylender's place. We met this guy called the moneylender, who we purchased weed from him, not from him, actually from a guy called Big Earl. But the moneylender had the press, and they owned this little souped up Mini Cooper S. It was a bulletproof back window, and they had a driver called Flyboy they used. So we'd actually met these guys. I had met them before. We'd been up in the mountains pressing weed with them for a couple of days with the two machetes. This big machete was like 7 feet tall, and there was a little machete and a Big Earl, and there was a bunch of us up in the mountains. So I went there to Kingston because we had weed stashed in the hills and the mountains. I wanted to sell it and get some more cash. We had 20 grand sitting in the machines, but I couldn't access the machines because of all the panic and sitting in I didn't want to start going around to the hotels and collecting money. I would have to get the keys off of Sid. So Saul showed up the next morning, Eric's dad, with a couple of guys, Trevor and his buddy. And one was white, one was a light Jamaican. Turned out they were also the CIA guys. And Saul said, I'm going to give you some money here. I want you to go to Montego Bay and But these guys, they were tracked down this guy who came down, who shot Eric. Actually, it wasn't Danny Polanski who shot Eric, although he was there. He was one of the three of them who went into the restaurant who shot. It was actually Mickey who shot Eric. My last podcast, I said somebody asked me who was it shot Eric. It was like after an hour and 40 minutes, my brain had stopped working. I said, yeah, it was Danny, but it wasn't Danny. It was Mickey. It's crazy how my brain could go like that. So we went back to Montego Bay and went down to the airport, and Danny Polanski was standing there by the Air Canada counter waiting for me. So we went back to the villa, arranged for a taxi driver to pick him up. If he'd rented a car, it would have been a different story. I thought he might have rented a car, but he actually didn't rent a car. Just surprised me also. So we were waiting for him at this other villa. The taxi driver told me he was taking 2 chicken dinners to these American girls at a villa, and he could come in and meet them if he wanted to. And so, of course, he said sure. And we were there waiting for him. The big machete just grabbed him by the throat when the door opened and just smashed him to the concrete. And they dragged him across the floor, taped him to a chair, and tortured him, pulled out his fingernails. And it wouldn't take long before he started talking about everything. He gave everybody up, just right on the spot. But eventually they blew him up in his car in Montreal.
I mean, almost just like a movie, huh?
Almost
Yeah.
just like a movie, that's right.
Wow. So these guys tried to kill you, and then Eric's dad and whatnot took care of him, and then you really meet these CIA people, and they try and get you to keep working for them, but you
Well,
say,
that happened before. That happened right as soon as I got out of jail.
"Oh, okay,
Yeah, they
okay."
offered me my own city right away. And I just said, I don't think I'm interested in being in this business anymore after what happened to Eric. It was like everything was too much for me. It was like 30 days in jail I had just been through a nightmare. And when I got out of there, the feeling of freedom was like unbelievable. It felt like I was walking on air. It was like such an incredible feeling. And I just never wanted to have that other feeling, being back in jail again. I just figured if something went wrong, I was back in jail or whatever, dead. I probably would have been dead. Unless my little voice tells me I would have been dead if I'd taken my own city. Somehow that would have happened.
Well,
Well, probably.
your little voice and your girlfriend kind of saved you,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. Well, my little voice saved me many times. And my girlfriend saved me too, a couple of times. So when I had my 1978, February 29th, 1978, my aorta split. The outer layer of my aorta split. I started getting really bad chest pains. I was watching my son play basketball. And I just got up and I walked out, and my little boy said, "Go to the hospital." But I didn't go to the hospital. They say men are really stupid when it comes to things like that. I went home and laid down. It was amazing. And Rebecca came and she said, "I was going to go to Thrifty's, but she was at the game, was sitting with some of her girlfriends, and I left, and she said, I thought I'd better check, make sure you're okay." Well, I wasn't okay. She just asked, she was like director of physiotherapy. She said, "Do you have any pains in your jaw?" I said, "Yeah, I got pain in my jaw. I got pain in my chest." And she goes, "Look, we're going to the hospital." So we went to the hospital, and she had me like she knew everybody. So we went into emergency, and I was in a CAT scan within 3 or 4 minutes. Dr. Dutton was just coming out, and she knew him really well because she had meetings with all the surgeons all the time. Anybody director and vice president up was at these meetings. So she knew him, and he told her, he said, less than 30% chance he's coming out of this. And I passed out after that, but he said I was dead when they wheeled me in. Actually, I was dead. He said, "You were actually dead. It's the scariest operation I ever did." He said, "Yeah, when I cut you open, your aorta shriveled up. There was nothing left of it. He said, I spent 7.5 hours working on you, and I was so tired from the operation before, where I did 6 hours or 7 hours on another patient, said I couldn't finish. So he said, I called in Dr. Brzezinski and Dr. Afish at midnight, and they worked another 7 hours. These are some of the best heart surgeons in the world, apparently. And he said, Dr. Dutton said, when I was talking to him a couple of weeks later, he said, tried to sew you up. We got your heart going again. And what did he say? But then your heart stopped. We got your heart going again, and we tried to sew you up again, but your heart stopped again. So we sewed you. So we got your heart going again. First time ever, we put tape on you. We'd never done this before. We put some tape on you and left you for a couple of days. He said, we'd never done that in the history of an open heart surgery. Put tape on somebody. He said, so we did that, and so a couple of days later, we sewed you up, and you were fine. Well, you weren't fine. I was out for 7 days. And then 7 days later, I woke up. And it was like, it was a weird feeling. It felt like I was 17 again.
It wasn't duct tape, was it?
What's that?
No, it wasn't duct tape.
I have no idea. I assume not.
I mean, because that'd have been a whole new use for that stuff.
Really?
But so what was the deal with the jaw? How did your wife know to ask about the jaw? And is that a sign or a symptom of a problem with the aorta? I did not know that. Is that why you
It's
said
a sign
that?
of a heart attack.
Oh, the jaw?
So not only did I have my aorta split, but apparently they took, I don't know, I forget how many inches, 26 inches of vein out of my right leg, because what he said happened was after your aorta split, the right-hand side of your heart had a heart attack. So we had to rebuild the right-hand side of your heart. That's why it took so long. So all these surgeons, and I knew a lot of doctors because of the business we were in, because my son was on a baseball team with Dr. Saunders, whose son actually got drafted and played in the big leagues, Michael Saunders. But Dr. Saunders said, yeah, he said, one of the ones who said, there was a story, one of the guys, a doctor who was one of my customers, told me a story. He said, a buddy of mine flew down to Texas. He was American. He came up here to live in Victoria, but he flew down to Texas for open heart surgery. And the guys from were the surgeons who worked on him said it was just a bypass he was getting done. He goes, why'd you come down here? He goes, I got the money. I want the best. I came down here. You guys are the best. He goes, you left the best. That's what they told him. And Dr. Dutton said or Dr. Saunders said, we have the pick of the best surgeons in the world because everybody wants to move to Victoria. It's such a nice place. So we had Dr. Berchinsky, and all these guys are apparently top guys in the world. So I was lucky that they were available for me.
Well, we're awfully lucky, I guess, to even have your book. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And
The gods kept me alive so I could write this book so everybody could realize that God is real, angels are real, miracles are real. Another thing that's real is astral traveling because I experienced that. And reincarnation is real. All these things are real. And one day everybody will get to find out where they're going to end up.
And CIA drugs is real too, So
Oh yeah, these guys, they ran the world. They virtually controlled, they did whatever they wanted to do. And I figure they brought in probably close to $1 trillion from 1952 to 1980, mid 80s, because the West End gang brought in from 72 to 1990, the RCMP estimated the West End gang brought in between 100 and 150 billion dollars worth of drugs. And that was just the West End gang.
Yeah.
But that was with the help of the CIA because Eric Stad was a professor and they lined up, we controlled the port because of them.
No, it's my contention that drugs became, especially opium, became the largest commodity on the planet in the 1830s, and really drugs have never left it. And we're talking about Escape from Jamaica, a true story of crime, faith, and redemption by William Gibby Gibson. You have any last thoughts, Todd?
Not much, just a powerful story. I would just reiterate that any good book carries with it great imagery with words, and I think this delivers in that regard. It's short chapters, hard to put down. You'll get through it quickly. It's that kind of a read. So,
because I'm a good writer. That's just because I was there, and it's easy to describe when you went through it.
Yeah.
So, you have any last words, Gibby?
No, not really. I think I said it all.
Well, folks, again, books are, they're silent little things. They just kind of sit there quietly, okay, until somebody picks up and reads them. And there's lots of information and, reasons to go forward with life here on this planet. So, onwards to a better future for our children. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.